Hello again, and welcome. This is Michael Pizzolla here. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of the Value Capping Rant. This is the 2015 Kentucky Derby video rant. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Pizzolla. I'm author of the best-selling book, Handicapping Magic, co-author of the classic Pace Makes the Race. I've been credited with being the creator of the original online racing forum, and I'm publisher of the Post Time Daily, which is a great online past performance. I also published the Blackmagic Ultimate Handicapper software and the upcoming ValueCapper software. So that's a bit about me, and I'd like to get into an analysis of the Kentucky Derby. Now, many of you, thank you, have given me some feedback, and they say, Michael, stop being so preachy. Just tell us about the race. Well, okay, I'm going to make this quick, but you need to hear it, especially those of you who have not followed my work or have been unfamiliar with me. I have come from a pace handicapping group way back. Some of you may know it, called Perco. I was one of the charter members, and it was all about predicting the outcome of the race. I have evolved over the many years that I've been involved in this game with moving from not necessarily finding the winner. Of course, we all need the winner, some winners, right? But, when I used to teach and I used to stand up there and, analyze races with the intention of finding the winner, it's a much different game now. First of all, the crowd has gotten much, much better. There's so much more information out there. So I've evolved to an approach which I call value capping. And the main principle of value capping is to find horses that you like. And by like, I mean whatever number you use, whatever approach you use, whether you're a speed handicapper, a form handicapper, a pace handicapper, and so forth, something that makes that horse stick out for you. But equally as important is that the public should not like that horse. In other words, that the public should underbet it. And so we look for overlays that we expect to be overlays. Now, there's a whole, science behind this. And I've incorporated all of that into the Blackmagic software and the upcoming ValueCapper software. But the principle behind it is very, very simple. So the challenge is with this approach, and for those of you who have been playing the horses for any length of time, know this very well. The challenge is to wait for those opportunities. How many times have we gone and we've handicapped a card of races or day of races, and we think, yeah, you know what, these two races, and then you get to the track or you get to the race book or you're looking and you think, well, this one is kind of marginal, and you wind up making bets that aren't great opportunities. Maybe the one you picked out that morning or the night before turns out to be great and wins, but you've diluted your profits. And so that patience to wait for those opportunities is paramount. And the best of those opportunities is when the race seems simple, when it's clear, when there's one overlay that stands out and you think, oh boy, don't know if this horse is going to win. Never know if a horse is going to win or not because you just can't. You can think, oh, yes, it's got strong numbers, it's got this, it's got that, but we don't know, not with any certainty. But when there's one overlay that stands out, it looks like it's got some good things going, it looks like the public may not like it, those are the ones to really take advantage of. Now, the Kentucky Derby, on the other hand, does not usually present one of those simple opportunities. I mean, think about this for a minute. There are 23-year-old Colts. They're going 1.25 miles for the first time. They are mostly champions who have won grade ones and potential champions, horses that are undefeated, for example. There's an auxiliary starting gate. There's the inside post staring at the rail. I mean, it's goofy in a lot of ways if you really think about it. Give me a 6-furlong race at a minor track going at night when there's no one in the stands. It looks like the the Baltimore Orioles Chicago White Sox game that happened the other day. I mean, there's 6 press guys there and a couple of guys with cameras. But in this, for the Kentucky Derby, I think they're expecting 160,000 screaming mint julep-fueled fans. And this has got to be unsettling for a horse. I know it was unsettling for me in the dozens and more derbies that I've been to. So in other words, the Kentucky Derby tends to be a handicapping puzzle. And so many years, I've just passed it. It's not a great betting race. Oh, yeah, I'll have a little token bet on it just to say I bet it. But the truth is that the undercard at Churchill Downs and the other tracks that are running that day very often provide much better opportunities. And that's because everyone comes out on Kentucky Derby Day. They want to bet the horses because the Derby is running that day. Yeah? I mean, it's only natural, but you can find sometimes when the so-called amateur money or unsophisticated money comes out on that day and they're bored. There's a lot of time between races and they're looking at other tracks and they're betting into those tracks. You can find some real overlays when they go overboard on maybe a weak favorite that really shouldn't be that strong a favorite. And you can find some great overlays in the other horses in those races. And yet I've got to admit, I mean, look, we all long for a champion. Most of us, we may be, cold, steely-eyed investors at this game, which is great, but most of us are also fans. And, it would be so great to see a Triple Crown winner like this picture of Secretariat. I was there in '73. I've also seen the last, the other 2 after that, and it was just such a thrill. So we want to feel part of that somehow. And for many of us, feeling a part of that is having a bet on the Derby. So, it's a fine balancing act. For many times the Derby is just is a quote-unquote action bet, which, if you're serious about the game, you try to avoid recreational betting and action betting and so forth. You just want to take those simple, clear overlays that come about. But it's the Derby after all. And so with that in mind, I want to take a look with you, looking over my shoulder at the 2015 Kentucky Derby. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the horses one at a time, the Colts. Forgive me if I say horses. I mean Colts, because they're 3-year-olds. And we're going to look right from the past performances, get a snapshot in our minds about what the pace scenario might be, who's come to the party, and then we'll look at it with the Blackmagic Ultimate handicapping software. So come on and look over my shoulder, and let's see if we can make some sense out of the 2015 edition of the Kentucky Derby. Okay, so here we are at the past performances of the 2015 Kentucky Derby, and these are the past performances from the Post Time Daily 2.0, which many of you are familiar with it, and thank you so much for your support and for your encouragement. Let's take a look at who's come to the party. Now, before I do that, I want you to know that I have gone ahead and scratched the 2 also eligibles, the 21 Fremento and the 22 Tale of Verve. So I don't want any of you saying, well, it doesn't match my screen. Well, it's because I've scratched those. Okay. So I want to get a sense of the Colts, where they are in the field and so forth. And if you notice, the very first Colt we come across is Ocho, third in the Bluegrass. This colt looks to be an early kind of runner, and the challenge that this will face is that inside post position. I know that Bob Baffert, I watched an interview that he did. He was waiting with bated breath to see where his colts would be placed, and the only one he really didn't want was this inside post. Find the same thing with Carpe Diem. Now, interestingly, Carpe Diem won very convincingly in the Bluegrass Stakes, and when I did my rant, it was one of the obvious horses. It was odds on and so forth. And Ocho 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 finished third to it. Now, very often when horses run against each other in the previous race, the crowd will overbet the horse that won that race and underbet the ones that finished behind it. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the literal winner. Sometimes it'll be the horse that finished second, and they'll overlook the horse that finished fourth, only a length behind, so that they'll make one 2-1, the other 10-1. Well, guess what? It's not, it's not rocket science that horse that finished only a few lengths back may be a better bet at 10-1. Why? Because it's more likely to win, because there's some magic about reversal races, or what used to be called tandem races? No, of course not. It's a value concept. Okay, enough preaching. Carpe diem. And, oh, by the way, if we look at Ocho Ocho Ocho, maybe, we can expect it to run on the lead at a 48-112 as in its last race. Similarly with Carpe Diem, when it won the Bluegrass right off the heels of Ocho Ocho. But again, it's stuck on the inside as well. Materiality, who won the Florida Derby, what do you say about this colt? It's 3 for 3. Don't know what it will do if it's stuck behind the pace, if it gets stuck down there because it's in the 3-post position, but it certainly has acquitted itself very, very well. This is a champion. It's won its maiden, won a little handicap at Gulfstream, and then won very convincingly in the Florida Derby. This could be any kind of colt, yeah? Then we come to Tencendur. Now, Tencendur looks like it's a bit of a closer. You see that move last time in the Wood Memorial. Before that, in the Gotham, it made a big close, being wide, and so forth. So there's one of the closers. Again, I'm trying to get a sense. So we've got Ocho, which looks like it's an early horse. We've got, Carpe Diem looks like it can press, but likes to be early. Materiality has come from second to win. Okay, so we're just trying to get a general sense here. Moving on, we get to Danzig Moon, who looks like a confirmed closer. 3 times to break its maiden. Didn't do much in the Tampa Derby, but finished a nice second again in the Bluegrass with our friends Ocho 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 and Carpe Diem making a close. Now, if there's a gaggle of horses up front that burn each other out, one of the closers might have an advantage. And very often I'll look for opportunities where there are almost all early horses in the race and maybe one closer or 2 that I can make a scenario about. Or on the other side, where there's just one early horse that will go out without pressure. And those are great pace handicapping opportunities. In this Derby, so far we've seen a mix of early, a couple of short pressers, a couple of closers. We've got Mubtahij. Mubtahij, we don't know. It's an Irish horse. It's 4 out of 7 lifetime. It's one of those unknowns. Looking at its comments, it said it's tracked the leader. So I would imagine this colt will be pressing, but it's one of those unknowns. Now, unlike other recent previous years in the Derby, there's only one of these foreign horses in, so we can get a better look at the possible pace scenario and so forth. Then we come to El Kabir, and El Kabir is, closed in its last race to get 3rd at the Wood Memorial. It made a big close to win the Gotham. Before that, it looked like a bit of an early runner. So I think they changed their strategy in the last couple of races, and they picked up a beautiful Grade 3 win. So I'm looking for El Kabir to close. Now, Dortmund. Dortmund is the second favorite, one of the Bob Baffert trained colts in the race. And what do you say about a colt that's 6 for 6? I mean, the highest it's ever been in odds, what its first start, where it was even money. And it's just, done very nicely, mostly on the lead. However, in its maiden race, it came from off the pace. And in the Los Al Futurity, it came from a little off the pace. So this colt looks like it can have a flexible running style. Couple that with the 6 for 6, couple the crowd throwing up their hands saying, well, I don't know how the race is going to go, but this horse can run from off the pace or on the pace, so I'll bet this one. I expect this to be co-favorite with American Pharoah, or maybe even the favorite in the race. Bolo just finished third to Dortmund in the Santa Anita Derby. It looks like it presses the pace a little bit. We come to Firing Line. Now, Firing Line just won the Sunland Derby down at Sunland with very, very fast fractions, 45 and 2, 109 and 1. It ran close to those fractions back at Del Mar, admittedly in a sprint. So it's hard to tell how those will translate to Churchill. But this is a colt where its route races looks like it wants to be up close to the lead. Moving to Stanford, we see in its last 2 routes, it has an early running style. It likes to be on and close to the lead. A second race back at that Isla Mora handicap, it went 48, 111 and 3. Louisiana Derby was a little slower pace, but, you know, the colt's going to be out there. And speaking of that Louisiana Derby, the winner of it is the 12 International Star. Now, this is a confirmed closing colt. It won the Louisiana Derby from off the pace. It won the Risen Star from way off the pace. It won the LeCompte from off the pace. Oh, and Risen Star, I believe, here's a bit of trivia for you, I think it's the last horse in the money from the 1 hole in the Derby. So that's something to keep in mind. But so we have a confirmed closer in International Star. Another colt that I think will close is It's a Knockout, coming from off the pace to finish second in the Fountain of Youth, and if I'm not mistaken, it got DQ'd out of that race. We see it didn't pick up its feet really in the Florida Derby. Now, normally if I see this at a $5,000 claimer somewhere, I think, maybe the trainer saw that it had something going and it put it where it didn't belong and it just relaxed. But, you know, this is a very interesting colt. I mean, it did beat Upset in the Fountain of Youth. It did absolutely nothing in the Florida Derby. So I think the crowd will look at this and say, well, it had a good 2-year-old season where it was 2 for 2. And then, yes, it won the Fountain of Youth, but only by disqualification. And I think they're going to let this go off at a very long price. We got Keen Ice. Keen Ice is another very, very deep closer, finished 4th in the Louisiana Derby and 3rd in the Risen Star. We have Frosted, and I frankly don't know, because in the last, Frosted just won the Wood Memorial. I know Kieran McLaughlin, I've heard an interview where there are high hopes for this colt. It's made some closes. It won its maiden on the lead. I expect this colt to be pressing. Again, it's in the 15 hole. Now we get to the outside horses. We've got War Story. War Story is another closer. Then we have Mr. Z, who looks like an early horse, a colt, It's 1 for 12. This is going to be probably the longest price on the board. And now American Pharoah, 4 out of 5. It only won it. The only loss it had was in its first start. And if you remember from the video I did on the Arkansas Derby, where obviously this was the horse, and it went off at 10 cents on the dollar. My concern was that is it only a horse that can win on the lead? Well, we really don't know. I mean, in 3 out of its 4 wins, it went wire to wire. Its last one of the Arkansas Derby, it was a little off the pace and then went on to blow out the field. Now today, or on Saturday at the Derby, where will it be? Well, it's in the 18 hole, and unless Victor Espinoza guns this colt to get it to the lead, it's probably not going to have the lead. So it's an interesting thing. Now, it's the kind of thing that I would take a risk at. A horse from the outside has to cross over and get the lead if I was getting, 10 to 1 or 12 to 1 in a normal kind of race. But American Pharoah should be the favorite or co-favorite with its stablemate, also from the Bob Baffert barn of Dortmund. Upstart was second in the Florida Derby. Upstart was the one who got it got put up in the Fountain of Youth. This is a colt that looks like it likes to come off the pace. Won its maiden from way off the pace. Won the Funny Side handicap from off the pace at Saratoga. Now, interestingly, this is a New York bred. Mentioning Funny Side, that was one of those classic reversals where Funny Side ran against Empire Maker. Empire Maker had just beaten Funny Side in the Wood, and then in the Derby, they reversed. And even though they were very close together in the Wood, Funny Side paid, $26, something like that. So this, and I believe that Funny Side was the only New York bred ever to have won the Derby. And now we have Upstart, who was, I think, bred up in my old stomping grounds up in Westchester County, New York. But this is a confirmed closer, again, coming way from the outside. And finally, we have Far Right. Far Right is a very deep closer. Nice second to American Pharoah. I don't think anyone was beating American Pharoah that day at the Arkansas Derby. So what have we discerned from doing this overview of the pace scenario? Well, there isn't really a clear pace scenario. As by my count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have 7 or 8 horses that like to be on the lead or close to the lead. We've got a couple that make short closes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and about 7 of the colts who like to close. So if I were going to predict what one of my fancy software programs would do, I would say it's going to throw up its hands and say it's unknown. Now, what do we do with all of this? Well, again, as I said, we go through this exercise to see if we can see an obvious pace scenario. We don't, so we're going to have to look further and kind of x-ray the race. And to do that, I am going to go to Blackmagic Ultimate Handicapper and show you how I handle some interesting situations with that. So let's go to that software, and we will finish our analysis on the 2015 Kentucky Derby. Okay, so here we are looking at Blackmagic's look at the 2015 Kentucky Derby. I'm going to reset this just to make sure that I haven't made any changes. So this should look, if you're using Blackmagic, virtually identical to yours. I've got some bold and underlined things which you won't have in your software. This is an experimental version from a while ago, but the numbers are going to be pretty much the same. Now, there's a concept of random, and there are 8 horses or 8 colts above random. Not so bad, really. Upstart, interestingly enough, is on the top of the line. Very interesting. Firing Line is second on the line. And, this was that colt with the very fast fractions from Sunland. They won the Sunland Derby last time. Now, sometimes when there's a new track, and LRC, the Los Alamitos race course, the one for thoroughbreds, it's not that it's a new track, but it's a new set of numbers. And if you notice, there's an asterisk on that number that puts it way higher than the others. And I'm going to go ahead and exclude that. And by excluding that line, it brings the colt way down. Now, I always look for where the fulcrum is in the race. And the fulcrum in this race is Dortmund. In other words, it's 110-3. Second call in its last race is something that is not aberrant for the horse. It's not out of whack, in other words, with the other second call routes that it's run. And it was near the pace at both the second call and the finish. Classic fulcrum. So why is it so far down? Well, Black Magic decided to stick it with its very last race. Now, I think that's a little unfair because, well, the Colt is 6 for 6. If I were to go and to move its form cycle window to its 3-year-old season, we see the Dortmund now moves up a little bit. If we were to open the Colt all the way, it moves to way on top. The truth is probably somewhere near that. I don't do a whole lot of clicking around. So if I were going to open every one of these Colts all the way, Dortmund's still on top. Big surprise, American Pharaoh is still there. And a true surprise is that Upstart is still there. So here's the way I am looking at it, where I'm going to give Dortmund all its races. And I've got Dortmund now on the top of the line. If we look at acupressure, it's pretty much what we thought. It's an unknown scenario. Ocho had some fractions back there. We'll put it on top. And then you see the usual suspects, Mr. Z, American Pharaoh, and so forth. And the closers, as we thought, El Kabir, Upstart, Danzig Moon, and so forth. So there's a mix of early runners and closers, and that's why the pace scenario, as we saw by eye, was unknown. Now, Black Magic went ahead and did its, well, magic. And, you know, in a 20 entry field with these 20 Colts, the odds lines, like Dortmund, is 9-1 on the Black Magic odds line. And you know you're never going to get an overlay on that. So if you think Dortmund is really strong, or American Pharaoh is 12-1 on the darn line, you know that's, you know, never, ever, ever going to get that line. You can do one of two things. One is you can stay out of the race. You're saying, oh, you know what? I think these are the best horses. They're going to get bet. I'm going to pass. The other thing is you can look among the others to see if there might be an overlay. And the obvious one to me is Upstart. Yes, I know it's in the 19 hole. Yes, I know it just lost to Materiality in the Florida Derby. But 10-1, it's 15-1 on the contention. It's 15-1 on the morning line. Around 20-1, I'm interested in this colt. Carpe Diem is the third on the line, you know, after my little tweaks, and it's one of the pressers. You know, it's 8-1 on the morning line. I would also need 20-1 to bet this. American Pharaoh, I'm not going to get to bet. Materiality also interests me. I'm going to need, again, a strong 20-1 or so to get involved in that. That's another colt coming from the Florida Derby. And if I'm going to use the colts from the Florida Derby, I've got to use It's a Knockout as well. So, and that one I'm sure will be, you know, well over 25-1, you know, 28-1, which is where I would need to get a price to bet. Interestingly, when we look at the race this way, the running style on the three colts at the top, Dortmund's kind of early, Upstart is late, and Carpe Diem looks like it can press a little bit. So we've got all three running styles there, which is great in an unknown race. And the one I think will be a price, of course, will be Upstart. Now, again, will it get there? Am I being sentimental because it's a New York bred? Perhaps. But it's there second on my line. Before I started messing around with Dortmund, it was top on the line. I'm going to use Carpe Diem. You know, I'll take two scenarios, one using Dortmund and American Pharaoh, and if they run 1-2, or even if they get, you know, second in the exacta, the exotics aren't going to be that much. But And again, what's American Pharoah going to do from the outside? What happens if Dortmund doesn't get the lead? And it could set it up for a closer like Upstart. The presser Carpe Diem, it's going to be in tough being down out of the 2-hole, but I'll still, again, this will be a board. I will be a board play. In other words, I don't have a Colt here and saying, oh yeah, this has got such great stuff going for it. I'm kind of leaning to Upstart, but again, I'm going to need a strong 20-1. And so why? Well, my odds line on it is 10-1. And bear in mind, when I am betting, or you are betting, a horse that you make 10-1, that means if the race is run 11 times, it only wins once. That's what 10-1 means. So, you need to get compensated if you're going to bet that kind of a long shot. And the same thing with Carpe Diem, because these odds lines are quite high, as you would expect in a 20 horse field, Colt field. Materiality is a colt that interests me, and it's a knockout. So I'll box the horses out of the Florida Derby, meaning Materiality, Upstart, and it's a knockout. And that would be a knockout. I think they're doing some kind of promotion with It's a Knockout in the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight that's going to happen the same day here in Las Vegas. Thank you very much for all of that traffic. It's quite a wild day. So my basic analysis is the pace scenario is unknown. I think you got to give Dortmund its due, and if so, it becomes a strong contender in the race, as is American Pharoah. Going to look to use the Colts out of the Florida Derby, Upstart, Materiality, and It's a Knockout, and look to the board to find a decent price. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, I often look at the undercards. Now, where this race looks like a bit of a headache, I mean, if you take a look at a race like the Churchill 8th race that day, the Distaff Turf, where you get a nice little mare second on the line, 6-1, 12-1, 15-1, Kitty Wine. These 4 horses all come out of the Honey Fox. They're going to overbet Lady Lara and Sandiva and Coffee Click, and they're letting the mare that finished 5th, but only 2 lengths back. Only 2 lengths back of Lady Lara. And if they let it anywhere near 12-1, I'll be all over it. For those of you who are going to be up late, the Lone Star 4th race, we've got another one of those kind of sticking out, hold the papers, an 0 for 10 maiden. I know, but again, at 15, 20-1. Those are the, and especially because the top horse is on a layoff. You see that one start layoff. But again, this is Thursday morning. These races don't happen until Saturday. There'll be scratches. There'll be track conditions. So I'm not, but I just want to show you these are the kind of jump off the page opportunities that I generally look for. If you'll bear with me, and a bonus for those of you who have stuck it out to the very end of this video, if you want to take a look at the Kentucky Oaks, and we see a couple of these champion fillies. Of course, Stellar Wind looks like is one of the morning line favorites and so forth. But again, second on the line is this Eskin for Money, who just ran against Bird on the Wire. And, it's second on the line. Again, I'll need 20-1 or so to bet this. The fulcrum out of the race is Angela Renee. I'm going to use that in exotics. I'll use the other horse out of the Gulfstream Oaks, where Bird at the Wire won. Eskin for Money came in second. So that to me looks like a nice opportunity. I'll take Eskin for Money at 20-1. Angela Renee, if I don't think I'll get 20-1 on that. Bird on the Wire, I'll never get the price on it. And it's not that Lovely Maria and I'm a Chatterbox aren't, and Stellar Wind aren't good fillies. They are, but at the price, I'm looking at Eskin for Money, Angela Renee, and Bird at the Wire. Very often, the Kentucky Oaks can provide a good upset, and there's also that double with the Derby. So again, in the Derby, right out of the box, Upstart was on top. Dortmund, when we fiddled with it, we gave it its races. I'm looking most strongly at the Colts from the Florida Derby, namely Upstart, Materiality, and its knockout. So with all of that, look, it's a complicated race. It's a complicated situation. But with all of that, remember to wait for your opportunities. Remember to let the bet make you. In other words, where you just go, whoa, yes, there's that one. And if you do that with some discipline, to bet horses that you like that the public shouldn't, to wait until you get your price, to stay out of messy races unless it's the 1 or 2 days a year like the Kentucky Derby or the Breeders' Cup where you just have to because you're a fan and you want to see if there's going to be a Triple Crown and so forth. I get it. But for the most part, go about this game as an investment. Bet horses you like that the public shouldn't, and most of all, wait until you feel no doubt or hesitation to say, yeah, this is the one. When you get that, that's kind of a signal that all signals go. I'm not saying that they will always win. Of course not, because we don't know what's going to happen in a race. But you will feel good about it. You will feel certain about it. And if you're certain that you have bet a horse that the public is under betting, that it's got things that you like that the public shouldn't, then you are putting yourself in a position to profit. So whatever happens this weekend, please enjoy. Let the bet make you. And thank you for all your support and your encouragement. Until next time, this is Michael Pizzolla.